This episode is presented by the Blue Rider.
Check out the Blue Rider in downtown Minot for a laid-back vibe and outdoor patio and 16 beers on tap.
They've got live music, trivia nights, and one of the deepest record collections around.
Plus fair prices, friendly faces, late-night favorites like grilled cheese and pizza.
The Blue Rider, serving Minot since 1994.
Good drinks, good music, good people.
I wanted to make a difference here in North Dakota, but I didn't know where to start. I wanted to help advance economic progress in our state and empower families by expanding educational options for all of our students. If I can make a difference, so can you. Visit afpnd.org and take your first step today.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
Welcome to Plain Talk, where we are going to be talking to the not quite yet Supreme Court Justice Friese. Mark was just appointed to the position by Governor Armstrong not long ago, but not sworn in yet, Mark. We're recording this on Friday, March 4th. You're going to be, Wednesday, March 4th. It's going to be published Friday, March 6th. And then on Monday, what would that be, March 9th? You'll be sworn in to the court?
Correct. I'll take my oath and begin duties on the 9th.
So what does, you wanted this job. I mean, obviously you put your name forward. This is something you wanted to do. Why did you want to be on the Supreme Court? Why is that important to you?
I was a law clerk at the Supreme Court when I first started my legal career 25 years ago. I saw the inner workings of the court. I've appeared before the court on numerous occasions. I've read almost every opinion that comes down from the court throughout the course of my career. And it was that experience and kind of a draw to go back into public service that caused me to put my hat in the ring. If I want to be more blunt, it's a lot easier to be critical of the court when you're sitting on the opposite side of the table. So I've had some criticisms of some of their decisions and some of the things that they've done. And I'm hopeful that I can impact some change and offer a perspective that's quite frankly not been, held by the court previously.
Mark, can you talk about that different perspective? I think you do have a unique background being a police officer, being a criminal defense attorney. I don't think that's a normal background for somebody who's going to be a Supreme Court justice. Can you talk about the unique perspective of sort of being on both sides of the criminal justice system before going into this job?
Sure. And I also was a military lawyer, so I both prosecuted and defended cases in the military. I think, former Justice O'Connor Sandra Day O'Connor from the U.S. Supreme Court summed it up well when she said the military system is really a good example because lawyers who work in the military system are, by virtue of the position, they have to both prosecute and defend so that they see both sides of a case, that they have a level of objectivity that a lot of career prosecutors or career defense lawyers don't have. So I think some of that background, the military and law enforcement, and importantly, representing individuals and working in private practice is a perspective that historically hasn't been overrepresented on the court. Right now, there's no one on the court that is a private practitioner. Justice Crothers was. He's now retired, but all four of the remaining justices are former prosecutors, former district court judges. All were former district court judges, and most of them had prosecution background, not a lot of defense background in the court historically. So I'm hopeful that perspective will complement the court in its decisions.
You said you had some criticisms of the court in the past, and you're hoping now that you're on the court to maybe address some of those things. Give us some examples.
Well, and I don't want to comment about a particular case or a particular theory, but there are instances where the court has not been consistent in its rationale, consistent in its reasoning. It appears to be a decision that's based out of utility or lack of digging into the case from the perspective of the practitioner. I want to make a committed effort to closely review the record, closely review the arguments of the parties, and importantly, try to provide consistency in decisions so that, appellate decisions should be predictable, they should be consistent, and they should be, I'm looking for the right word here, but I think practitioners need to be able to rely on those decisions and know how those decisions are going to come down. And we haven't seen that universally from our court.
So, Mark, your background as a criminal defense attorney has led you to have some pretty high-profile cases. You defended Ray Holmberg and other things like that. I have a lot of friends who are defense attorneys, so I sort of understand the why. But can you talk about, as a criminal defense attorney, why is it important that somebody like Ray Holmberg or other people who maybe don't even have the resources and connections have a strong defense against the crimes that they're accused of doing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chad. And our entire system is predicated on the principle that uh, punishment meted out by the criminal system can only be done if due process of the defendant or the accused has been protected. So everyone is entitled to a defense. The richest person, the poorest person, and everyone in between is entitled to a defense, and they're entitled to hold the government to its burden of proof. There's a lot of long-standing cliches and commentary from the court, like it's better to let 10 guilty go free than it is to convict an innocent. But that's really the principle upon which our system was founded. Um, the criminal system is just part of the system. A lot of people who are accused of crimes are also sued in civil court, and they have to pay penalties through civil sanctions and what have you. But when our government is going to take away the liberties of an individual, we must stand vigilant to protect the rights of people, even those that appear to be obviously guilty.
Serving on a body like the state Supreme Court, I don't want to call it a policymaking position because our legislature writes the laws. Along with obviously with cooperation with our executive branch, not the courts. The courts apply the law to given cases. But the reality is, the practical reality is the court makes a decision on something and it sets precedent. So what are your thoughts on that? Like as the court, considers issues, and I'm not going to, obviously, I know you don't want to weigh in on particular issues now that you're going to be serving on the bench, but as the court weighs these things, that's a very heavy burden to carry. What's your philosophy about it?
I well, for about 20 years, I've taught at the local university at NDSU. I instructed a course entitled Judicial Process, which undergraduate students look at the American court system, state courts, federal courts, municipal courts. And I would suggest to you, Rob, that courts are policymaking institutions. The nature of the court really masks and hides its policy inclinations. For example, the Supreme Court in North Dakota has superintending jurisdiction over all of the lower courts. They promulgate all of the rules. If court rules conflict with statutes, the court rules prevail in application to court cases. So there is policy making, but the overarching policy decisions have to be made by the legislative and executive branches. It's just the way our system worked. The courts serve as a check and a balance, and there's no doubt, and this happens with everyone who's asked to be a judge. There will be policy decisions that I'm tasked with evaluating, with which I don't agree, but I will have to affirm because the principal policy making has to develop in a context where ordinary, normal citizens can come in, present their arguments. Those arguments can be considered by the lawmakers. It should not be developed based on a lawsuit between Jane and John in the context of a case where nobody else has the ability to come in and opine. So I think most judges, by virtue of their position, need to be deferential to in the federal system, what they call the elective branches of government. But in North Dakota, our judges are elected. So they're also elected, but they need to be deferential to the legislative and executive branches.
Mark, you're currently a partner at one of the biggest, if not the biggest, law firm in North Dakota. How does the unwinding of conflicts work once you're on the bench? I mean, are you going to end up having to recuse yourself from a bunch of cases early on, or I'm sorry, this just popped into my head that this seems very complicated on how you unwind from a career doing law at Vogel Law Firm.
Yeah, for sure. A judge in every instance must avoid the appearance of impropriety. And if I were to sit on cases that are being argued by my law partners, that would appear completely unfair, even if my decision were the right one. So there'll be a period of time where I won't take any cases involving my law partners, but it's larger than that too. I've consulted with other attorneys who practice in my area. I've served on the Indigent Defense Commission. I teach at the law school, so I've been consulted on cases that are likely going to be appealed, and I'll have to disqualify from those cases. That's not uncommon. It happens with a judge who's a former prosecutor as well. It happens with judges who come from the Attorney General's office. I think that the Supreme Court justices, if you watch the register or the docket, you'll see that there are justices that are disqualified all of the time. So we'll work through it, but there will be a period of time that I'm going to have to stay away from cases involving my former law partners.
So what is that period of time? It's not forever, is it, that you have to recuse yourself from cases with your partners, former partners?
It's going to depend, I think, Chad, on the type of case. If the case originated while I was with the law firm, I'm going to seek disqualification on those. Like my former law partner is a federal district court judge. He stayed away from our cases for a year. Some stay away from 2 years. So it's going to depend on when the case came in. If it was from our Bismarck or Grand Forks office where I wasn't directly involved, it'll be easier to sit on those cases than if it was out of the Fargo office where I'm currently located.
We talked a little bit, and you corrected me, because the court does make our state Supreme Court administer, in addition to obviously presiding over cases, also administers our judicial branch, and makes rules for the judicial branch. One of the things that came up, several years ago now, where the courts were going to put, and of course the reporter is going to ask about putting all the court records online, but for a hot minute, the Supreme Court made it so that you could not only, because currently you could search the dockets, like you could search and you could find, you put in somebody's name or whatever, a case number, and you could find traffic tickets, felonies, all that stuff. But you can't actually, us members in the public can't click on anything to see the actual documents and filings, which is of endless frustration for some of us. For a hot minute, the state Supreme Court made it so that we could click on them, but then we ran into problems because it turned out that, in the courts, we haven't maybe been doing a great job about redacting some of the information out. So they pulled it back, and it's been kind of sitting in limbo ever since. Are you interested? I mean, first of all, what is your opinion about putting those records online, getting those online, understanding the particular challenges we're facing? And then also, are there any other administrative changes or initiatives that you'd like to pursue?
I've been on the court's Joint Procedure Committee since 2018, and that's the committee that evaluates rules that are then presented to the court for adoption. So I've seen a lot of that. I've commented on a lot of it, and I think when it relates to, courts are open, and they're open to the public largely. There are certain types of proceedings, adoption proceedings, mental health proceedings, others that by their nature are restricted. There has to be a careful balance. The public has a right to know. You have a right to sit in the courtroom. You have a right to access the docket. But the danger exists when those court records are used for improper purposes. There are companies that go out and take advantage of and harvest information from court records. They solicit business. They send letters to people. I've dealt with this in my own practice. Where
there's somewhere it's almost like ransom, where like if you have a DUI, like they'll put in an open records request for your mugshot. They'll list it in such a way that it comes up at the top of Google searches, and then will charge you money to take it offline. I mean, that happens out there, and it's disgusting.
I agree. I agree. And I've had former clients that have come in with letters that appeared to be official looking letters from companies that sell ignition interlock devices. We don't typically use those in North Dakota. We use a different program called the 24/7 program. So I've had clients that have paid a ton of money to bottom feeding companies that go in and harvest those records and send official looking notices. And I think the courts have an obligation to protect people from those things as well. So I apologize that it's not a straightforward answer, but I think there's a careful balancing that needs to be done between access to public records and making sure that information in those records can't be used inappropriately.
Mark, what makes you most excited about joining the Supreme Court? And are you you don't get to choose your cases anymore? They get to choose you. Are you the personal aspect of helping individuals through tough times? Are you concerned about that? You're going to miss that?
I'm concerned about that a lot. In fact, as I was working on cleaning out my office years and years ago, when I first started, my law partner, Bruce, told me, he says, you're going to get letters and cards and things from clients who will reach out years after you've represented them or after the case is done. He said, keep those. And when you're having a really crummy day, go to the folder, pull them out, take a look at some of those. And I had a great big box full of cards and letters and thank you notes from clients and their families for helping them through difficult times. I'm really going to miss that aspect of practice. I'm going to miss working with my contemporaries in my office. I'm going to miss working with a lot of prosecutors with whom I've developed professional relationships too. So being on the court is going to be isolating. I won't be able to speak as openly and publicly as I have in the past on issues. So I'm going to miss a lot of that, but I'm really looking forward to digging in and expanding my horizons, hopefully offering some insights and opinions to the other members of the court from the perspective of the practitioner. There's going to be a trade-off. It's going to be a little bit isolating, but I'm looking forward to it. And then, quite honestly, Bismarck's home. My mother's there. I'm going to spend much more time with my mom out in the eastern part of the state for the last 30 years. There's personal reasons that I'm looking forward to heading back that direction as well.
Well, damn it, Mark, that was my next question. I was going to ask if serving on the state Supreme Court means you have to live in Bismarck now.
Get to live in Bismarck. Not
Get to live in Bismarck. Have to live in Bismarck. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I didn't mean it that way. Bismarck's a lovely community. But I guess I was gonna. So maybe I'll ask. What part of the job are you most excited about? I mean, obviously it's kind of bittersweet leaving your private practice, but there's a reason you wanted this job. What are you most looking forward to?
I'm looking forward again to this, expanding my horizons. I've always liked the academic part of law practice. I've liked to dig in. I've liked to raise issues. I've liked to look at the history and the development of the law. And this is a lot more academic, and it's done in a circumstance where you don't have to make the objection during the middle of trial. You have ample time to take a look at it. So having the luxury of time. The support staff that the court has is amazing. They hire the best people coming out of law school. The justices that I will be serving with have remarkable, impressive backgrounds, and they have very broad experiences. So I'm looking forward to learning more than anything.
Mark, I don't think a lot of people think about the Supreme Court in North Dakota, and I think we've got some unique rules in terms of needing 4 justices to rule something unconstitutional compared to a lot of states. Can you talk about just sort of those basics of how something comes to the Supreme Court and the process of the hearing, then the decision making, and then those kind of rules?
Sure. Well, the North Dakota Supreme Court, like any appellate court, is what is referred to as an error correcting court. They don't rehear cases. Witnesses don't testify. The court bases the decision on the record that was compiled below. Sometimes that record will be compiled through an administrative agency. Most often it's compiled through a trial court process from a district court. And then if one of the parties believes that an error was committed by the trial court, they'll appeal to the Supreme Court. We also have an intermediate court of appeals in North Dakota that's not been activated for years. A court of appeals, it takes more effort. They basically bring 3 district court judges in to serve as kind of an intermediate appellate court, but it's ineffective, it's inefficient. So the court has been handling all of the appeal cases. North Dakota is a mandatory appeal jurisdiction, meaning if you have properly filed the appeal, the Supreme Court has to hear it. Most states have discretionary review, meaning the court can say, we'll hear it if we want to hear it. If we don't want to hear it, you're foreclosed from further argument. So the record is compiled, it's sent to the Supreme Court. Briefing is completed by the parties. most often there's an oral argument that occurs before the court where both of the parties will come in and present their arguments, and then the court will consider it collectively and issue a written decision at a later time.
Is that in law that the court has to hear all the properly filed appeals? That's in state law.
It is.
Is that I mean, do you agree with that? I don't know if that's one of those questions we're not allowed to ask the judge, but
No.
I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about that? I mean, should we follow other states and give the court some discretion?
You know, I'm going to give you the answer that I gave during my interview process. I don't know. I don't know if our court is overburdened. I don't know if they're hearing too many cases. I don't know if there should be some discretion. I do know that the court does have the ability to kind of meta out frivolous appeals by summarily affirming or summarily reversing, so that doesn't take as much effort. I know the court hears a large number of cases, some 300 a year, sometimes more. But I don't know for sure, Rob. Once I get there for a while, I may have a different opinion, but I think it's important that people have an opportunity to be heard, and the appellate court process facilitates that. I like North Dakota's system. I've had cases that I've appealed in the Minnesota system where I think that the court should review it, and they've simply declined without providing an explanation, solely because they have discretion. We're not like the U.S. Supreme Court where there's thousands of cases appealed and they hear only 40 a year. It's worked well during the course of my career. I like it the way it is. I don't know if it's time for a change or not. It's possible that it may be.
Seems like logistics would be kind of the big issue there. I mean, one of the reasons why we're probably able to do it in North Dakota is we're such a small state. I mean, if the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court for a nation of hundreds of millions of people, of course they're going to limit how many cases they can logistically handle, probably any more than that. But our state Supreme Court, so probably it's kind of like the legislature, where logistically, they're able to hear every bill that comes before them.
But
But as we get bigger, maybe that changes.
oral arguments are pretty limited, though, right? Isn't it limited usually to an hour?
Yeah, 50 minutes usually. Sometimes there are amici or people, friends of the court, who will file briefs. Sometimes there's longer arguments, but I think both you gentlemen are kind of right. Minnesota, for example, they have an intermediate court of appeals. So the first appeal from the trial court is to the Court of Appeals. They're mandatory review. They have to hear them. And then if you appeal from the Court of Appeals, the Minnesota Supreme Court has discretionary review. That's the way most state court systems are set up. But because we really don't have a functioning intermediate appellate court, I think it's important that we preserve the right for an individual to appeal and have appellate review.
Mark, we just actually in our Wednesday show, we interviewed Levi Bachmeyer, who, like you, was just appointed. Levi was appointed to an unexpired term for Kirsten Baszler. And under the law, he'll be on the next ballot. You won't, because we treat judges a little bit differently. So you'll have a little bit more time. And maybe what you were talking about, that time where you have to, kind of at the front of your term, you're going to have to recuse yourself from some cases. So maybe it's good judges get a little bit more time to settle in. That being said, eventually you're going to have to campaign, because this is an elected position in the state of North Dakota, which I have always found very, very weird. Because judges exist in this place where it's like, they're so circumscribed a lot of times in what they can say. It feels like to me, I guess, just as an observer from the outside looking in. But on the other hand, you're also supposed to make a case to the voters for reelecting you. And I think there's kind of a reason why we end up not paying a lot of attention. Maybe we should pay more attention, but we end up not paying a lot of attention to judicial elections because, honestly, a lot of times the candidates aren't saying much. And if there's even a competitive race at all. So do you think we should be electing judges?
That again is a great question. In my capacity as a adjunct instructor, I did a lot of study about judicial selection systems, and states vary. There's various derivations of how judges are elected or appointed. Some are appointed by the governor, some are appointed by the legislative branch, some are elected. It depends on what the question is. How do we get the best judges? Statistics show that we get really good judges, whether it's an elected or an appointed system. At the end of the day, we get generally the same quality of judges. It really boils down to this decision of, do you want accountability or do you want independence? Or do you want kind of a mix of both? Elected judges are accountable to the public. That sometimes results in judges being removed from office because they make right but unpopular decisions, which I think is probably not a good thing. But we also want judges not to go rogue. So I think that the system in North Dakota has worked well. I think it's always worthy of debate. That's a question really for the public and for the voters, not the court on how we should select judges. Most Supreme Court justices come to their position the same way that I did, and that's through appointment, through a vacancy. So North Dakota uses a modified approach. We do elections. If there's a vacancy during office, the governor appoints with the help of a judicial selection committee. And I'm very impressed, having just gone through that process. I'm very impressed with the amount of work that those folks do in looking at candidates and their background and trying to choose who they believe will be best.
Here's what I'll say that I don't want. I don't want our Supreme Court races to become like we see in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and some places where they're uber partisan and millions of dollars are spent from outside groups trying to influence one decision or one issue. I think that I kind of like the system that we have right now. And the reality is, while they're elected positions, how often are they competitive, right? I think I'm thinking back to
Well,
my
our system is that system. The only difference is that just hasn't happened here.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm thinking about Sarah Vogel ran back in like 1996, and then Belinsky's ran a couple times. But other than that, I don't know that there's been super competitive races, have there?
Um, you know, there hasn't typically. I think that's a real testament to the folks that we put in those positions. Uh, Good justices who are doing good work, even when they face an opponent, have a tendency to keep their positions. So I think it's as much a statement about the quality of judges that are being appointed as it is the system itself.
And let me ask you this question: as somebody obviously decades working in the criminal justice system on both sides, now moving into the judicial branch, what is the impact of sort of I say our current obsession with true crime? We've always been obsessed with true crime. We've always serial killers and murder and robbery and all this stuff. We've always the newspaper coverage and everything. I mean, that's been with us for a long time. I feel like what's new is technology has made it. When the Nicole Rice trial was going on, obviously that was a case that originated. It was tried in Grand Forks, but originated in Minot. The amount of attention on that was intense. I mean, the number of people watching that stream, who I think weren't even from North Dakota. I ended up making a cameo randomly in that trial, unbeknownst to me. I don't know how I fell ass backwards into that. But, the response that I got, like within seconds of them mentioning my name during the proceeding, was amazing. There are so many people. And on one hand, like, I don't think it's a bad thing that people are paying attention to those proceedings, but there is an element to that that's a little bit grody. And I'm wondering, like, do you feel like that's shaped the way Americans view the judicial process, that process? Like, has it shaped it? Has it tainted it? Has it created some unhealthy habits, or is it not a bad thing? What's your view on that?
Well, the federal courts, for example, don't allow cameras in them at all. I've had my sketch drawn by sketch artists in federal court because they can't bring cameras in. I've also had cases where
I'd love to know how you feel about that sometimes, about how they represent. Because
the artist,
I look at some of those sketches like, whew,
yeah,
boy, they're not doing that guy any favors.
no, and that's been my experience too. But quite frankly, the cameras haven't been very good to me either.
Join the club.
But no, the reality is cases like that, high profile, prolific cases are kind of like modern day passion plays. It's a battle of good and evil played out in a courtroom. The truth, most court cases are dull, boring, kind of sullen affairs where people aren't interested. So the occasional cases they're interested, I think it's good because it pulls back the curtain a bit and people see what's happening in the courtroom. But as a longtime practitioner, I can tell you it's really, really difficult to try a case in the courtroom while correspondingly trying it in the media. And there's always a danger that the jury's watching what's happening in the media rather than listening to what's being presented in court. So there's a really, really intricate balance, I think, that needs to take place. I like the fact that the public has a chance to see what's happening, to see that the system is fair, to see that the lawyers are actually just doing their job. They're not trying, they're not trying to to pull a fast one on a jury. They're not trying to hide evidence. It's actually presenting a case so the jury can make a decision. So I think there's a lot of good things that come from that publicity, but we need to be careful.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate your time coming on. Good luck at your swearing. I say good luck, like like something could happen last minute. Uh,
He's not
somebody else
properly
jumps.
raising his hand or whatever.
Yeah. Although we saw, remember in Dickinson where like they tried to recall a bunch of city council members because somebody
Yes.
didn't do the oath of office right. Yeah, people get wrapped around
Do
the
it right,
axle about
Mark.
that stuff. We're not gonna ask Mark for his legal opinion about that though. That would be inappropriate. Though, Mark, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Good luck.
I appreciate it, gentlemen. You bet.
I wanted to make a difference here in North Dakota, but I didn't know where to start. I wanted to help advance economic progress in our state and empower families by expanding educational options for all of our students. If I can make a difference, so can you. Visit afpnd.org and take your first step today.
This episode is presented by the Blue Rider.
Check out the Blue Rider in downtown Minot for a laid-back vibe and outdoor patio and 16 beers on tap.
They've got live music, trivia nights, and one of the deepest record collections around.
Plus fair prices, friendly faces, late-night favorites like grilled cheese and pizza.
The Blue Rider serving Minot since 1994.
Good drinks, good music, good people.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back, where I stupidly started recording while Chad was still trying to talk to me about what the hell we're going to talk about in this.
We're going to wing it. It's going to be fun for the listeners.
Well, we're winging it now because it's recording. So here we go. I was telling you just while we paused there momentarily to let Mark go. I love our interviews that we do with people from the judicial branch because again, they don't get interviewed that often. And I understand like people kind of want to tiptoe around like you never. And I told Mark, I said, you know, if we ask a question that like ethically, you can just tell us that. Like we completely understand. You know, I don't want to. We can't delve into how would you rule on this case or whatever. That's just not appropriate. But there's so many things about the way the court operates that even in this age where you know the courts are probably like court proceedings probably have more eyeballs on them than maybe any other time in history, thanks to live streams and social media and everything. There's still a lot to learn. I didn't know we had an intermediary. I didn't know like we had an intermediary appeals process in state law. We never use it.
Right.
I didn't even know that existed.
So I learned two other things. I didn't know that it was like a legislative hearing where everybody gets their day in court, literally, no matter what. But secondly, the fact that he is the only justice, going to be the only justice who worked in private practice and the only one who has a criminal background, defense background. I think that creates like some really interesting stuff that we'll never hear, but I think there'll be like a very different perspective in that room of somebody who's worked in private practice, worked in the military stuff, and not just come up through prosecutor, judge, Supreme Court justice.
Well, I don't think it was any secret that I was rooting for Mark to get on the court. And that was part, I mean, part of it is I know Mark and I think he is not just a good person personally. I think he really, I mean, he, as busy as he is in his private practice, also was an instructor, a teacher. I think he really cares about the academic side of this. So he brings that, but primarily it was exactly that perspective. I am very, very passionate about criminal defense and how important criminal defenders are to our process, even when their clients are guilty and deserve the sentences that they get, which is most of the time. Making sure that the state follows its processes and is not violating people's rights and not running roughshod over the law is important. It is an important check. We don't talk about it enough, but it is an important check and balance on government authority. So having that perspective on the court, I think, is hugely important.
Well, and I think it's not often that you get a defense attorney, criminal attorney who gets appointed to these positions for a couple of reasons. One, Kelly Armstrong's got a unique perspective on this. And so I don't think he's the normal governor appointing somebody because he was a criminal defense attorney before. But I also think a lot of really successful criminal defense attorneys can't afford to go back into public service after being successful criminal justice. I mean, they make a lot of money, and I shouldn't say can't afford. They choose not to because of the economic decision. So I think this is a unique circumstance of Mark wanting to get back into public service, and then having a governor who kind of likes having that other perspective from a criminal defense point of view. I think it was really unique, and I think it's a good choice. And I look forward to see if there's changes that we see come.
I do wish I sometimes I wish the courts could, and I say this, like, I don't know how to effectively accomplish it, because I, like you, I don't want our judicial races to turn into, you know, judges having a platform of like how they would rule on certain cases. I think that would be terrible for our society. But it is really hard sometimes that there's this air of mystique around the judicial branch where it's very opaque. Like, you really, other than reading their opinions and listening to their comments in open court, and maybe you could get some insights from the sort of interviews we just did with Mark, but you really don't get a lot of insight into who they are or why they made decisions the way they made them, because that's just not the tradition. And I know there's like rules too governing it, ethics rules, but it's hard. It's a hard balance, because sometimes I wish we had that insight, but also a lot of time I understand why we don't.
But I see cases, and Wisconsin comes to mind, Pennsylvania comes to mind again, where you've got like public sector unions going in for tens of millions of dollars, and then the Chamber of Commerce crowd coming in with tens of millions of dollars, specifically over a issue, whatever that issue might be, because they want to get the majority in the Supreme Court to rule
Card check or abortion,
or whatever it is. I don't like that. I don't like the idea of it, because there's so much more than just the one issue. I also understand that often that the Supreme Court is, it's supposed to be the check on when maybe the partisan politicians aren't behaving the way they're supposed to. So do you get that check if everybody is a political appointee from one ideology?
Well, for instance, like the politicians all get together and they mandate the 10 commandments on every wall in the school. I would think, as a non-judge, but just as a member of the public who can read our Constitution, I think a law like that should probably be struck down, because we're not allowed to have an established religion. And unless you're going to post doctrine from every religion in America on the school walls, which I think would be absurd, you're elevating one religion over the others. The court should strike that down. I don't want a judge campaigning on that. I want them to make the right decision, because that one of the most important jobs the judges have is to make unpopular positions. Make unpopular rulings, because that's what the law requires.
So I think that 10 Commandments example is a great example, because it is one of those things that people will be really, really passionate about. In the grand scheme of things, in terms of policy, probably not that important, but it is so obviously unconstitutional, and there'll be a bunch of people pissed if a justice ruled against them. And I don't want that. And it sort of feel like sometimes I wish we'd have more competition, just so there's some different points of view, but I also don't want them to be overtly political, and I don't know how you do that.
It's a careful where you wish for, because on one hand, I've done it. I've moaned about, these judicial, they're not competitive, and because they're not competitive, are we really getting the best candidate? On the other hand, what's the end result of them being competitive? The problem, all you need is one judge to get in the race who's kind of promising to be an ally to pro-life or pro-choice or pro-business or pro-labor or what have you, those hot button issues. Then it becomes an arms race, because if the unions are going to back a judge, then you can bet the business crowd's going to jump in, or vice versa. They're going to jump in and back their candidate. And now it's just another group of politicians.
Right, and I think the social issues are the place where you'd really see that in North Dakota specifically. I think other places it is that scenario that I laid out and then you just, laid out as well, business
But
versus
it doesn't even have like the carbon pipeline stuff where
Sure,
a
sure.
judge runs for the Supreme Court saying, I'm
I'm
going
gonna
to
shut it
stand up for
down.
property rights and I'm going to shut it down. What we don't have anything to stop that. I mean, you were pointing to Wisconsin. The only reason things like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania haven't happened here is it just hasn't happened. And I'm glad it hasn't, and I hope it never happens. And if it does happen, we are going to have a mess on our hands. But
Yeah.
I
And it
don't want
can't
that kind of
yeah,
stuff to
and it
happen.
can't just be one justice either. Like in order like it would have to be 2 or 3 in order to have effective change at the Supreme Court. So maybe that's saving us that you might have one person who jumps in to do that sort of thing. But I don't know. I think the system we have now is working pretty well. And again, I think the only like real competitive race I remember was like 1996. Sarah Vogel ran against Mary Mering. And that was I remember candidates being in parades and that kind of thing. I've never seen that other than that.
I do remember because there's a famous case because like I end up writing about our corrupt practices campaign laws quite a bit, and there was a famous case involving uh former Justice Vanderwall, who served on the court forever, was there a long, long time. But it was actually a famous case where he was appeared in campaign ads. I think it was like a newspaper photograph. It kind of dates the time. But he was wearing his judicial robes. And that actually got challenged whether or not that was lawful for him to use sort of the uniform of his office. And the courts ruled that it was okay, that he hadn't violated the law, which I honestly don't even know if I entirely agree with that. Because I don't, um, anyway, I kind of just interesting stuff. I love our judicial interviews. I was very excited about Mark getting on the court. I think it's a good
It
thing.
really pulls the curtain back a little bit. I mean, we had Crothers on and now we had him on about all of it. So, I mean,
Now,
and
bringing up Crothers just reminded me of something I wanted to ask Mark. Crothers made some interesting comments about the independence of the judiciary, which were clearly pointed at some of the things that's happening federally, where the Trump administration just open defiance of the court, running down the justices. Now, again, not problems that we have in North Dakota, because I think we have a better class of public servant, both on our judicial branch and in our elected offices. Well, I guess they're both. You know what I mean. Um, but again, I think his point was well made about needing. And so I kind of wanted Mark to reply. I have a feeling I know what he would have said. And I think he would have been very supportive of Justice Crowther's comments. But what an important message for right now in the here and now is
what
the
drives me
independence of the
crazy about
judiciary.
the federal Supreme Court and Trump, I mean, the federal Supreme Court agrees with Trump 98% of the time. And then the one time they disagree, he runs them down.
Yeah. And it's further even down I mean, you see a lot of federal judges, even Republican appointed judges, who are very much pushing back just on the procedural gimmicks and a lot of the other things that they're doing. Um, is frustrating. But I am glad. I mean, you do want to see. I was so thankful when the justices ruled against Trump, not just because I thought he was wrong, but just also to show people there's some independence on this
Right.
court.
There may not be any
That's a healthy.
independence in the congressional legislative branch, but the courts still have a little independence.
A little bit. What else do we want to see? This is where we screwed up, where we didn't talk about what we wanted to talk about. So now I got to ask you, Chad, what do you
Did
want to
we?
talk about now?
I don't think we talked Wednesday about the state conventions that are coming up.
No.
And so I think
As people are listening to this, I'll probably be heading down to Bismarck for the Democratic convention. Um, I'm going to make a bold prediction, Chad, and we won't know if I'm right until the end of the month because I do like that the parties are not holding their conventions on the same weekend again, so I can actually attend them both.
it's interesting, Rob. Back when I was executive director of the party, it was tradition that executive directors would call each other and sort of negotiate so we wouldn't be on the same weekend.
Yeah,
And
last cycle they were both
Yeah.
in Fargo on the same weekend, and I kept wanting to get over to the Democratic event, but there was so much going on at the Republican event, I just couldn't leave.
And I assume there's just less since the system has become much more one party, that there's just probably not as much interaction between the party staff.
Yeah. But the Democrats holding their convention this weekend, so the 4th, 5th, and 6th, or not 4th. I'm sorry. I keep thinking because we're recording this on Wednesday.
Sixth,
The
7th.
6th and 7th in March 6th, 7th in Bismarck on the Bismarck State College campus. They rented out some of the facilities there. Here's my bold prediction, though, and by the Republicans are holding their event the last weekend of the month. I think the Republican turnout in terms of delegate is going to be very, very close to the Democratic turnout. I think they're going to be very close. I think the Democrats are going to do a little better. I think they're going to end up with around 400 or so. And I think Republicans are going to be in about that same ballpark, which would be a massive fall off for them.
So I don't have any data on the Democrat side beyond some anecdotal stuff. I didn't go.
Yeah, I'm basing it on just kind of talking to people.
But I will tell you, so I didn't go to the district convention. I'm not attending the state convention, but I did hear District 35.
I don't know why you don't want to come hang out with me at the state convention, but
we'll see how the weekend goes. We used to do shows from the conventions back in the good old days, and then I think you got threatened at one of the Republican
I got some cowboy hat threatened to punch me in the face. So,
which I would have been there for. You would have punched you in the face, and I would have ran. But what I heard from District 35 is they not only filled their delegate slot, they had like another 10 people who are alternates, which is unheard of in that district. And so we'll see. I mean, one of the things that is a struggle when you have it in Bismarck and Minot is Imperial Cass doesn't like to travel west. And so how many people are coming from Fargo over to these conventions might drive the numbers down a little bit. But I don't know if it'll be as many. I think the Dems will be up. The Republicans will be down. It's just a question of what is that sort of difference. There is enthusiasm, though, on the Dem side.
I heard a rumor that the Republican, and this isn't something I've verified, but I trust the source, where the Republican Party has been cutting its printing order, obviously because, they have brochures or whatever, leaflets or whatever that they distribute to delegates. They've cut it in half twice. They were at 1,500. They've come down now. The last one, I guess, is they're at 500, which tells me if you print, like you would obviously overprint. You're going to print more than that. Tells me they're expecting less than 500.
Maybe they're having people share things because they can't afford to do the full print run because they have no money.
Well, that could be it too. That could be it too. But
Rob, let me ask you this. So the GOP statewide incumbents, by and large, most are indicating they're not going. So do you...
No, they have not made like a public announcement.
Sure. But if, let's say they don't, so would you expect that the North Dakota GOP still endorses candidates at that convention? Are they going to endorse a candidate to run against the PSC candidates, against Drew Wrigley, against obviously Julie Fedorchak? They will.
They do that. Devin Szynski, I think, is from the populist faction. He's going to run for that.
For what?
He's going to run for PSC.
Okay. How about Attorney General though?
Yeah, I don't think so. Now, some of the things that, I was writing about their rule change, which, by the way, I guess that's something we could talk about, is the party wanting to fine Republicans. We got to talk about that in a minute. Some of the rule changes they're proposing makes it look like they're going to open the door, because right now they're not allowed. Right now, candidates seeking like statewide office have to pay a fee to the party. And that was implemented as kind of a filter. Basically, a lot of times the statewides end up donating some campaign money to the party anyway. This was just sort of to filter out some of the unserious candidates. If you can't raise $1,000 to run for tax commissioner, then you're wasting everybody's time. So they're gonna get rid of those fees though, and then my understanding is they're also going to try to change the rules to allow floor nominations at the event, which are not currently allowed under the rules. So if they change those, if they're pushing to that and they get those rule changes, that tells me that they're wanting to be able to nominate some people at the convention for statewides who aren't going to be there. Now, again, the statewides haven't made like official announcements, like we're not going. That being said, I also know I have not seen any evidence that any of them are putting in any work at all to recruit delegates to go to the state convention. So if you're a statewide candidate, you're going to be on the ballot, you're going to be seeking the convention endorsement, you recruit delegates, right? You recruit people to go to the convention to vote for you at the convention. None of them are doing that. That tells me they're not going.
Right.
I shouldn't say none of them. I think Josh Gallion's going to be there. And I think maybe the tax commissioner is going to be there as well, Brian.
So you
Cross.
think Crotius and Gallion are going to go? Okay, those would be the two that might.
I think so.
That's interesting.
I think the rest of them are not good. Now, this is not me like insider information. That is my expectation is the rest of them probably aren't going to be there.
The one person we know won't be there is Governor Armstrong, because they didn't check with him on if the dates work for him or not. And I think, to quote the governor after he was censured, is that the state party does as much to defeat me as they did to help elect me. I think I'll be just fine. So if I'm Julie Fedorchak or others, who have far right, I wouldn't be worried about this endorsement for one second.
I don't think any of the candidates, I don't think any of those primary races would hinge on whether or not the candidate has the NDGOP endorsement. I don't think the average member of the public cares. Especially when we're talking, the one, Jill Kringsted's the one kind of newcomer. She was just appointed to the PSC. Obviously she's going to be new to voters. The rest of them are all incumbent. They've all been on the ballot before. I don't think a single one of them are going to have any problems at all. Barring some scandal or some unforeseen turn of events, which I have no reason to anticipate. I don't think the party endorsement matters. Now, the party thinks their endorsement matters a great deal, which is some of the other rules I wrote about, where one rule was, in order to be eligible for the party's endorsement, they have to comply with the party platform. Which I guess means that if the North Dakota Republican Party puts in a resolution opposing carbon pipelines, then every Republican in the state has to oppose carbon pipelines. And if they don't, they can, under a rule proposed by Gerald Gorick, district chair from District 2, they could be fined $100,000, which is absurd. I'd like to see the party try to enforce that. And they could also have their endorsement and even party membership revoked.
Rob, even like think about on vouchers, school vouchers, which is an issue that sort of drives a divide between Republicans, and obviously somebody who's in a rural area.
There are people of good faith on both sides of that debate.
And Rob, they're representing different constituencies depending on if you're rural or urban or all these different things.
Sure,
so if a rural Republican who's conservative on everything says school vouchers are not good because they don't benefit my constituents, you're going to fine them and kick them out of the party?
Right. I think there are, I personally support carbon pipelines, but I can understand some of the people who are concerned about eminent domain and property rights. I understand those arguments. I think, again, another issue where there's people of goodwill on both sides, but now the party takes a position and everybody has to adhere to that position. And you know what the comparison I made in my column was to the Communist Party. The Stalinists in Soviet Russia, the Maoists in China, that's what they do, where the party decides what everybody's stance is. And then if you don't adhere to the stance, now obviously in a communist regime, those people are getting sent to the gulag or getting disappeared or even killed. I'm not insinuating that any of that's going to happen here, but they certainly want to try to disappear people from party ranks, And and the thing about it is, the thing that makes me laugh about it the most is that they really think they have the power. There are some members, and I don't know if they're actually going to pass that rule or not. It's a proposed rule. I think coming up here on the 14th is when they have their state committee meeting. The thing that makes me laugh about it is they really think that they can enforce that. They think that this party has that much power. And I think what they're going to have when they see the size of the crowd that actually shows up in Minot, what they're going to realize is they don't have that much.
Right. Yeah, I think it's going to be super interesting. They don't have any power. And I know we have a text message coming that before we get to that, I do want to mention there was a pretty big political story that came out yesterday. Democrat House Leader Zach Ista decided not to seek re-election. That's a big deal. I think you and I texted a little bit about it. One, Zach is just an exceptionally competent legislator and leader for Democrats, but also he's been somebody who's worked with the governor's office exceptionally well and that type of thing. So I think the legislature will miss him. I get it. He's got, multiple kids at home and going to Bismarck and being one of 11 in a caucus or whatever the number is. It's got to be an uphill battle. He'll be missed because it is some institutional knowledge for the Dems. He hasn't been there that long, but he's a really talented guy. that he will be missed. And I think it's also a political hit for Dems, right? That Zach isn't running. He'll be back at
District.
some point, but yep.
He's the only Democrat in that district in Grand Forks right now. And there is Republicans have a pretty strong candidate that they were going to run anyway. Now I'm forgetting his name. I have his press release.
Holmes,
This
I
is
think.
terrible.
Something Holmes.
That's right. Yeah, very strong. I don't know him that well, but
Yep.
very strong resume anyway.
Right.
So I mean, there's a really good chance Republicans probably pick up that seat.
Well, in the House, the Republicans also just kicked Murphy out. Murphy's going to have to go in the primary because they endorsed two different candidates. It was Holmes and a woman.
Yeah. Do you think he's going to have a problem?
What's that?
Have a problem? You think Murph's going to have a problem
At the primary?
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you see what his vote was on school meals? I read the governor's poll before the last special session.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if that's going to be an issue, though, because the person he's going to be up against probably would have voted the same way.
Yeah. The problem with Murph, though, is he voted that way, and then he was all over the place talking about it. If he just would have voted no and shut his mouth, maybe it wouldn't have been as big a deal, but that's not really Eric Murphy's style.
He's also, I mean, just talking, and I like Murph.
So do I, very much so.
But he's also, like, he introduced that abortion bill that probably isn't sitting right with a lot of, and I suspect that's probably going to be the bigger issue in that primary. When you look at who his challenger is, she's very, very socially conservative. And again, I'm forgetting her name. I was just so terrible. I should have gone back.
Yeah, but in your defense, we didn't talk about what we were going to talk about here, and we're just throwing up subjects.
In my defense, we didn't prepare.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that works out to a defense of me.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's just me that doesn't prepare. So I mean,
yeah. I'm so that's terrible of me. I don't have.
I'm excited to hear this text, though. You gave me the subject, but not the actual content.
So no one had texted previously when we talked about Governor Burgum, and taking down the LGBTQ flag at Stonewall and all that, and he had texted in objecting to us characterizing sexual orientation as sort of an intrinsic personal trait. His argument was it's a choice. Our argument was it's not a choice. It's just part of who you are. It's not any more than being heterosexual was a choice for you and I. It's not a choice we made. It's just who we are. I don't see it's any different. Anyway, he texted back, and this is Nolan from Wing, North Dakota. I listened to your comments following my previous text and wanted to follow up. A person does not choose their sexual orientation, but he or she does choose to use his or her sexual orientation as the primary characteristic with which they identify. That is the choice I was referring to. I don't identify as a heterosexual man. I identify as a Christian husband and father. Lastly, the Christian Church's treatment of LGBTQ persons throughout history has frequently been harsh and unloving. That is wrong. No excuses. Thanks for keeping me informed on North Dakota. I appreciate it. So I thought that was a very reasonable response. I mean, he's making a little bit of a distinction where he's saying he objects to people sort of using their orientation, I guess, in his way, as sort of their defining characteristic, like their identity. And my response to that is, again, I don't care. I do think that as a society, sometimes we do tend to do that, where we sort of like a person's identity becomes their whole personality. And I think we do that, like, culturally, like where we have like a gay character in a sitcom or something that's just a caricature of gay people. And I don't know that that's always been very helpful. I mean, like anybody, people in the LGBTQ community are complex and have a lot of different facets to who they are. One thing I hear a lot about from people I know who are gay and are rock-ribbed conservatives on every other issue. They're gun owners, they're pro-low taxes, they're business people, entrepreneurs. And the problem they have with the Republican Party is that so many people in the Republican Party hate their orientation. And I think it's really hard when, like, I don't think gay people choose to have their orientation become this public issue. I don't think that was their choice. The problem is that if you're going to persecute them for doing something as simple and normal as just wanting to be loved by another human being, if we make that a societal issue, of course it's going to look like they're defining themselves that way. But who thrust that upon them? That wasn't their choice.
Yeah, I've talked to people on the left who have often said, like, when Josh Prochet was elected, and it's like he was the first openly gay legislator, and people have said, well, I don't care. Like, I don't care that he's gay. Well, it is sort of a big deal, right? That he's openly gay. The other thing that sometimes when people say, first of all, appreciate Nolan's, I thought his response was very good. But the other thing that often people say, well, gay people just like will put it in our faces. Well, am I throwing over my shoulder here for people on video? It's a picture of my wife and my kid and me. Now, if I was a gay teacher, for example, and I had a picture of me and my husband on my desk, is that throwing my sexuality in your face? Because you would have no problem if I had a picture of me and my spouse, if she was a woman, on my desk. So sometimes, like, same-sex couples do the same things as opposite-sex couples do. But for some reason, we say, oh, they're just throwing their sexuality in our face. No, they got pictures up of people they love.
Yeah. Listen, if you don't like, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily Nolan, but if you're the sort of person that is made uncomfortable by a gay pride parade or a drag show or something like that, something that's sort of obviously intrinsically LGBTQ culture, if that bothers you, don't go. But they're allowed to live, and I don't know that it's any different. I mean, I know gun owners who make gun ownership like their entire person. They got the NRA sticker and they're walking around ostentatiously carrying a gun. I'll tell you, I'm a gun owner. I support Second Amendment rights. That bothers me that they're making that their whole. So, I mean, I get it. I get it that it can rub people the wrong way.
Will wear like a baseball hat with their team on every single day, and it makes them it's part of who they are.
I know. My whole personality is I'm a Yankees fan.
I'm a Dodgers fan.
And the thing is, like on a personal level, if that rubs you the wrong way, the only thing I could say is you live in a free society. You're going to see and hear some things you don't like. You're just going to have to.
I would also just add, I appreciate him pointing out and agreeing with the fact that Christians have persecuted people of same-sex relationships for a long time. That's an important thing for people to recognize and not just say, well, they're sinning, so therefore they sort of deserve this. So I'm impressed by Nolan's sort of openness of this conversation.
Very nuanced. Nolan, really appreciate the feedback, the back and forth we've had. Thank you for listening. Certainly appreciate it. Speaking of which, thank you everybody for listening to this episode. If you want to join the program like Nolan did, 701-587-3141, you can send a text, you can leave a voicemail. We'll use it. We'll use it on the show, possibly. Also, plaintalknd.com. Plain Talk ND is our handle on Facebook, Twitter, X, everywhere. Every social media platform we should be on. Plain Talk ND. There's one we're not on that you'd like to see us on, easier to follow, let us know. Maybe we'll put our content there as well. If you're watching on YouTube, if you consider hitting the subscribe button so you can be notified when we post new episodes and new clips and things like that. And as always, thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again.
That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
I stupidly started recording while Chad was still trying to talk to me.
I wanted to make a difference here in North Dakota, but I didn't know where to start. I wanted to help advance economic progress in our state and empower families by expanding educational options for all of our students. If I can make a difference, so can you. Visit afpnd.org and take your first step today.